Scan it again, sir. It says paid. The little girl's voice was almost swallowed by the rain, but the blue card in her hand rose higher, trembling only at the edges. The bus door hissed shut toward her face. Then a man's black-gloved hand caught the rubber frame from outside, stopping it an inch before it sealed. Elliot Mercer looked at the pass, saw his own company's name, and forgot how to breathe. 20 minutes earlier, Route 18 had been just another city bus dragging its tired lights through Chicago's South Side, its windows fogged by wet coats, cheap coffee, and the sour metal smell of rainwater on the floor. Nia Carter stood at the curb beneath a flickering shelter lamp, 9 years old, small enough that her backpack made her shoulders look narrower than they were. Her coat had one missing button. Her sneakers were damp at the toes. But her paid pass, the one thing she kept perfect, was sealed inside a cloudy zip bag she had washed and reused so many times the corners had gone soft. In her other pocket, an old phone buzzed once, then went silent. Mom. Nia did not answer. Her mother was working the late cleaning shift at the depot, and when Denise Carter called during work, it usually meant a supervisor was nearby or something had gone wrong. Nia stepped onto the bus carefully, tapping the pass against the scanner the way she had been taught. The machine gave a short, ugly beep. Not the soft green chime she knew. Driver Roy Harlan turned his head just enough to look at her over his shoulder. He was a heavy man with silver stubble and a city badge clipped straight across his chest. Step back, he said. Nia blinked. It's paid, sir. The machine says different. She leaned toward the small screen, reading the red letters before he could block them with his palm. It says 17 MR. A few passengers looked up. Most did not. That means manual review, Nia said, softer now but clearer. It doesn't mean unpaid. Roy's jaw tightened. Not much, just enough. You work for transit now? Nia's fingers tightened around the card. My mom cleans at the depot. I read the poster. A man in a gray suit sighed loudly from the front row. Somewhere in the back, a teenager snickered. Roy stood, opened the front door again, and gestured toward the curb. This bus isn't a shelter. The words landed colder than the rain. Nia's chin lifted, but her eyes shone. She did not beg. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded receipt from the Harold Washington Library kiosk, the paper rubbed thin from being checked too many times. Paid at 7:12 this morning, she said. Roy did not take it. He only looked past her, toward the schedule, toward the traffic light, toward anything except the child holding proof in both hands. Across the street, Elliot Mercer sat inside a black SUV behind tinted glass, one thumb resting on an unread message from his chief operating officer. Keep tonight clean. No surprises. He was supposed to be on his way to a charity dinner for the Grace Mercer Access Fund, the youth transit program named after his daughter. Then he saw the blue card in Nia's hand, saw the white Mercer logo near the corner, and watched his own bus begin to close its door on her. Elliot stepped out into the rain. At first he was irritated, not moved. He thought it was a delay, a misunderstanding, another small public problem his staff would smooth over. But when Nia raised the pass toward him, he saw something written on the back in careful blue ink. NIAC, Room 3B, column OM first. And beneath the scanner's red glow, the screen still did not say unpaid. It said manual review. Manual review. The words glowed in red on the little scanner as if the machine itself had whispered a warning and then gone silent. Elliot Mercer did not move at first. Rain slipped from the edge of his black coat onto the rubber floor mat, one drop at a time, while the bus idled beside the curb with its headlights burning through the gray afternoon. Roy Harlan kept one hand near the control panel, his thumb hovering close to the reset button. It happens, Roy said, his voice flat and practiced. Faulty card, bad renewal, wrong account. She has to step off until transit clears it. Nia shook her head once. Not hard. Not dramatic. Just once, like she had already argued this in her mind a dozen times before the adults arrived. That's not what the poster says. Elliot turned his eyes toward her. What poster? Nia held the paid pass against her chest, still inside the cloudy zip bag. At the depot, by the time clock. It says 17 MR means the rider waits while a supervisor confirms. It doesn't say put them outside. The bus seemed to shrink around that sentence. A paper coffee cup rolled under the first seat, nudged by the vibration of the engine. Someone's phone played a muffled weather alert, then stopped. Roy gave a small laugh, but it had no warmth in it. You expect me to take policy lessons from a child who hangs around a depot after hours? Nia's mouth tightened. I don't hang around. I wait for my mom. Elliot noticed then that she was not looking only at Roy. She was watching his hands. Roy's thumb still hovered near the reset. Quietly, Elliot stepped closer and said, Don't touch that. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The driver's thumb froze. Elliot took out his phone and photographed the scanner screen, the pass, and the thin receipt in Nia's hand. He did it like a man collecting small stones before deciding whether they were part of an avalanche. Scan it again, he said. Roy's nostrils flared. Sir, with respect, we're already behind schedule. Then scan it carefully. Roy took the card with 2 fingers, as though it were dirty, and tapped it to the reader. The same ugly beep. The same red message. 17 MR. Manual review. But this time, beneath it, another line flashed for less than a second before the screen dimmed. Hold placed at 3:41 p.m. Nia saw it. Elliot saw it too. Roy quickly reached for the side button, but Elliot's security man shifted half a step forward. No one else would have noticed the movement, but Roy did. His hand fell away. Elliot looked down at Nia. What time did you renew it? She unfolded the receipt with careful fingers. 7:12 this morning. And when did you try to ride? Now. Had you used it earlier today? No, sir. There was no pleading in her answer. Only precision. The kind adults often mistake for attitude when it comes from a child they do not want to hear. From Roy's dashboard, a small dispatch tablet lit up with a new message. He angled his body to block it, but the bus mirror caught the reflection just long enough for Elliot to read 2 words. Mercer Audit. Then the sender's name appeared beneath it, neat and ordinary and somehow colder than the rain outside. M. Voss. The name M. Voss sat on the dispatch tablet for barely 2 seconds before Roy Harlan swiped the notification away. Too quickly for a man who had nothing to hide. Elliot noticed the speed of it. Nia noticed the angle of Roy's shoulder, the same way she noticed when adults turned their bodies between children and the truth. Who's M. Voss? Elliot asked. Roy looked through the windshield, not at him. Depot supervisor. Standard routing. Then why did she message you after I stepped onto the bus? The driver's mouth opened, then closed. A soft cough came from the second row. The rain kept ticking against the windows, making the whole bus feel sealed inside a jar. Nia's receipt trembled slightly in her hand, but her voice did not. Miss Voss works nights sometimes, she said. She signs my mom's timesheet. That changed the air more than an accusation would have. Elliot looked down at her, then at the receipt. Show me again. Nia unfolded it all the way this time, smoothing the wet creases against her sleeve. Harold Washington Library Kiosk. Youth Pass Renewal. Paid. 7:12 a.m. Beneath the printed line was a sequence of numbers, faded but readable, ending in 1842. Elliot photographed it. Roy gave a thin, annoyed smile. A receipt doesn't prove it belongs to her. Nia turned the card over before Elliot could ask. On the back, in blue ballpoint ink, someone had written NIAC. Room 3B, call MOM first. The letters were careful but tired, the kind written at the end of a shift when a hand still smells faintly of bleach. My mom wrote it, Nia said, because when I was little, I left my lunchbox on the train. A small ripple of embarrassment moved through the passengers, as if the bus had been caught being cruel over something ordinary. Roy shifted his weight. Names can be written on anything. Not the renewal number, Nia said. She pointed to the bottom of the card, just under the cloudy plastic seam. Last 4 match. Elliot leaned closer. They did. 1842 on the receipt. 1842 on the pass account ID. He did not smile. He only grew very still, the way powerful men do when they begin subtracting excuses. Behind him, one of the passengers muttered that this was taking too long. Another said the girl should have been allowed to sit while they checked. Roy heard that and his tone changed, not louder, but sharper around the edges. Company policy says suspicious cards are removed from service. Nia looked up. But the poster says riders aren't. Roy's face hardened. Enough with the poster. That was the first true crack. Not anger exactly. Recognition. Elliot caught it and filed it away. He turned to the small security camera mounted above the windshield. Does that record scanner activity? Roy answered too fast. Only road footage. Nia shook her head. No, sir. It records the front step too. There's a little green light when it's saving. She pointed up. The camera's green light was off. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of people realizing the same thing at different speeds. Elliot lifted his phone and took one more picture, this time of the dark camera lens. Roy looked at it, then away, and for the first time since the bus stopped, he would not meet the child's eyes. The dark camera lens looked like a closed eye, and for a moment no one on Route 18 seemed willing to say what that meant. Elliot lowered his phone slowly. We're taking this to the office, he said. Not loudly, not angrily, but with the kind of calm that made Roy Harlan's face lose a shade of color. 20 minutes later, Nia stood inside the marble lobby of Mercer Civic Mobility, where the floors shone so brightly she could see the worn rubber toes of her sneakers reflected beneath her. Rain tapped the glass walls 30 stories above the street. Men and women in tailored coats moved around her as if she were a spill someone had not cleaned yet. Behind the reception desk, a giant screen looped a smiling video of Grace Mercer handing blue transit cards to children. All soft music and warm light. Nia held her own blue pass in both hands, sealed in the cloudy zip bag, suddenly aware of the damp cuff of her coat, the frayed pink thread near her sleeve, the tiny squeak her shoes made on the polished floor. A woman named Vivian Sloan arrived with a tablet pressed to her chest. She was the director of the Grace Mercer Access Fund, elegant, silver-haired, and gentle in the exact way that made gentleness feel like a locked door. Mr. Mercer, she said, smiling without looking at Nia. I'm sure this was upsetting, but bringing a minor into corporate space without a guardian creates liability issues. Elliot glanced toward Nia. Her mother is being contacted. Then perhaps the child can wait downstairs with security. Vivian's voice stayed smooth. We don't want her overwhelmed. Nia looked up. I'm not overwhelmed. The lobby quieted by a single degree. Vivian finally turned to her, and her smile tightened. Sweetheart, adults are trying to sort out a complicated systems issue. Nia's fingers pressed into the plastic bag around her pass. It got complicated after I showed the receipt. No one laughed. A Mercer attorney standing near the elevators cleared his throat and said to Elliot, we should avoid creating a record until we know whether the card was misused. The driver followed a reasonable interpretation of policy. Claire Donovan, Elliot's personal lawyer, said nothing, but her eyes moved from the attorney to Roy, who stood by the security desk with his cap tucked under his arm. Roy looked calmer now, almost relieved, as if the marble and glass had given him his power back. Vivian crouched halfway toward Nia, not enough to meet her eyes, only enough to look charitable. Did someone tell you to say these things, honey? Maybe your mother misunderstood the program. Nia's face changed then, not into anger, not into tears, but into something stiller. My mother cleans under your posters, she said. She doesn't write them. The silence struck the lobby harder than a shout. Elliot looked at Vivian, and for the first time he saw how easily kindness could be used to move a child out of the room. Vivian stood, smoothing her blazer. I'll have records pull the account. We'll handle this internally. She gave Roy a small nod, the kind meant to reassure him that order had returned. But as she turned, her tablet lit up with the account file she had opened too quickly, and Nia saw the same phrase at the top that Roy's scanner had hidden in red. Manual hold placed before first use. Vivian's thumb moved fast to close the file, but not fast enough. Elliot had already seen the timestamp, and so had Nia. Manual hold placed before first use. The words sat between them in the bright lobby like a stain no one wanted to claim. Vivian gave a small, professional laugh. That can happen during overnight batching, she said. It doesn't mean anything improper occurred. Her tone was reasonable, almost kind. That made it colder. She guided them into a private waiting room with frosted glass walls, a white leather couch, and a bowl of green apples no child had touched. Nia sat on the very edge of the couch, her knees together, her paid pass still sealed in the cloudy zip bag on her lap. A television mounted in the corner played muted footage from a Mercer charity event, children smiling under gold lights while adults applauded themselves. For a few seconds, the only sounds were rain against the glass, the low hum of the building, and the faint clink of a spoon as a receptionist stirred coffee outside the door. Then Vivian placed a folded taxi voucher on the table in front of Nia. "This will take you home safely," she said. "Your mother won't need to be pulled into a corporate review tonight." Nia looked at the voucher. Then she looked at Vivian's hand, resting too close to her tablet. "My mom already got pulled in," Nia said. Vivian's smile did not move. "Sweetheart, you may not understand how employment works." Nia reached into her coat pocket and took out her old phone. The screen was cracked across the top corner, with a strip of clear tape holding it together. Elliot noticed the case had faded stickers on it, tiny stars and one peeling school mascot. Nia did not hand it over. She held it with both hands like it was breakable and dangerous at the same time. "I understand clocks," she said. "And I understand voices." Vivian's eyes flicked to Roy, then back. It was quick, but Elliot saw it. Nia tapped the screen and opened a voice. Memo labeled spelling words. The label was innocent enough to make the room feel smaller. Before she pressed play, she looked at Elliot. "I was practicing because I keep spelling receipt wrong," she said. "I didn't mean to record anybody." The audio crackled, full of washing machines, distant wheels, a metal cart rattling across concrete. Then a woman's voice, low and clipped, slipped through the static. "Start with the shelter routes. They never fight paperwork." Vivian's face did not collapse. She was too trained for that. But her fingers tightened around the tablet until the leather case creaked. Elliot stared at the phone long after the recording ended. Something about the voice, not just the words, stirred an old memory. Grace at 8 years old, sitting in the back of his car, asking why a boy at her school had to borrow bus money twice a week. He had promised her the fund would fix that. He had let other people make it efficient. Nia locked the phone and tucked it back into her coat before anyone could ask to examine it. "That voice was in the depot last night," she said. "And this morning, my pass was stopped before I used it." Vivian stood. "This is now a legal matter. No one should make assumptions from a child's accidental recording." But as she turned toward the door, her tablet lit again with a message preview from Paul Renner, the man Elliot trusted to run the whole program. Did the girl keep the phone? Elliot read the message preview once, then again without changing his face. Did the girl keep the phone? Paul Renner had not asked whether the child was safe. He had not asked whether the pass was valid. He had asked about the evidence. Elliot placed his own phone face down on the table and looked at Vivian as if he had seen nothing. "Have Paul come up," he said. Vivian paused with her hand on the door. "He's at the gala site. Then call him from there." His voice was quiet enough that everyone had to listen harder. Vivian nodded, too quickly, and stepped into the hall. Roy remained near the frosted glass, pretending to study a safety poster. Nia watched all of them in the reflection of the dark television screen. She did not look like a child waiting to be rescued. She looked like someone counting exits. Claire Donovan leaned close to Elliot, her voice barely above the rain tapping the glass. "Do you want me to preserve the card logs?" Elliot did not turn his head. "Everything from the last 30 days. Scanner activity, manual holds, reimbursement reports, driver overrides, and security footage from Route 18. Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. "Quietly, quietly." Nia heard that word and looked down at her paid pass, pressing her thumb against the plastic seam. "Sir," she said. Elliot looked at her. I don't want money. The sentence was so small that even Roy glanced over. Nobody said you did, Elliot answered. They usually do, Nia said. When grown-ups want you to stop being a problem. The room went still. Outside, the rain dragged silver lines down the windows. Somewhere beyond the glass, a cleaning cart rolled over tile with a soft rattle, and from the break area came the tiny sound of a spoon touching the inside of a mug. It was an ordinary sound, warm and human, and for half a second the room almost remembered how to breathe. Then Claire's phone vibrated. She read the first file that came through from Mercer Data Services, and the warmth vanished. Elliot, she said. The hold on Nia's pass was placed at 3:41 p.m. He nodded once. We saw that. Claire looked up. Her renewal cleared at 7:12 a.m. But the pass was not selected by the system. It was manually entered by an administrator account. Roy shifted near the door. Elliot did not look at him. Whose account? Claire's thumb moved across the screen. Marlene Voss initiated it. A beat. Approved by Paul Renner. The name seemed to lower the temperature in the room. Elliot's eyes moved, very slowly, to the muted television where old gala footage showed Paul standing beside him beneath a banner for Grace Mercer Access Fund, smiling as if compassion were a language they both spoke fluently. Elliot remembered Paul's hand on his shoulder the day the program launched, remembered him saying, I'll protect her name like it's my own. Nia's old phone buzzed again inside her coat. This time she answered, but she did not speak first. A woman's tired voice whispered through the cracked speaker. Baby, don't sign anything they give you. Elliot closed his eyes for 1 second, and when he opened them, he finally understood that the person he had been protecting for years was not Grace's legacy, but the man quietly selling it back to him. Elliot did not react to Denise Carter's warning through the cracked speaker. He only looked at Nia, then at Claire, and something passed between the adults without a word. Mrs. Carter, Elliot said gently. This is Elliot Mercer. Your daughter is safe. Please stay on the line. On the other end, Denise went silent except for one unsteady breath. Roy's hand moved toward the frosted glass door. I should get back to my route, he said. Elliot did not look at him. Stay. The word was quiet, almost polite, and Roy's hand stopped on the handle. Claire set her phone flat on the table. A file transfer bar crept across the screen, pale blue against black, loading Route 18 scanner logs from the last 24 hours. Beside it sat Nia's folded receipt, her blue paid pass, and a paper cup of water Vivian had brought but no one had touched. The room felt too clean for what was happening in it. Vivian returned first, Paul Renner behind her, removing his leather gloves as if he had walked into a scheduling inconvenience, not a child's life. He was tall, silver at the temples, dressed for the gala in a midnight suit. His smile landed on Elliot, slid past Nia, and settled nowhere. I heard we had a misunderstanding, Paul said. Elliot nodded once. We're clearing it up. Paul glanced at the table. Good. Then we can get the young lady home. Nia held the phone tighter inside her coat but said nothing. Elliot picked up the paid pass and turned it over, studying Denise's handwriting. Paul, walk me through policy. Paul's smile softened. Practiced. If a youth pass is under manual review, the driver may remove the rider until account status is verified. Nia looked up. May I ask something? Paul finally looked at her. Of course. His voice was kind in the way a locked window is kind to rain. If the poster says wait for supervisor confirmation, why did Mr. Harlan tell me to get off? Paul blinked once. Posters are simplified for staff. Nia shook her head. No, sir. It had the long words. Vivian's mouth tightened. Roy looked at the floor. Elliot's eyes did not move from Paul's face. Which poster? Paul asked. Nia pointed toward the hall. The one by the time clock, under the little camera that blinks green. The room held its breath. Paul's expression barely changed, but his right thumb pressed hard against the seam of his glove. Claire's file finished loading with a soft chime. Elliot did not open it yet. Instead, he said, Roy, when you saw 17 Mr. today, did you call for supervisor confirmation? Roy swallowed. Dispatch was aware. That wasn't my question. A small red light flickered above the waiting room door. Nia saw it first. She leaned toward Elliot and whispered, "That camera is saving." Paul heard her. So did Vivian. And in that tiny blinking red light, Roy Harlan understood that the girl with the wet sneakers was no longer standing alone. The red light above the waiting room door blinked once. Then again, patient as a heartbeat. Paul Renner looked at it for half a second too long. Elliot saw that too. He had spent 20 years learning how men lied in boardrooms, how they smiled through missing numbers and called fear strategy. But this was different. This lie had rain on its shoes and a child's handwriting on the back of a bus pass. Claire opened the scanner log first. The pale blue screen reflected in her glasses as she turned it toward Elliot. Nia Carter, Youth Pass ending 1842. Renewal cleared at 7:12 a.m. Manual hold placed at 3:41 p.m. Administrator override. M. Voss initiated. P. Renner approved. Paul gave a quiet sigh, almost disappointed. Approvals are often automated under my credentials. You know that, Elliot. Vivian nodded quickly, grateful for the explanation. Roy stared at the untouched cup of water. Nia did not look at the adults. She looked at the timestamp. 3:41, she whispered. Elliot turned to her. What is it? Nia swallowed. That was when my mom's break ended. She had to go back past the time clock. Paul's smile thinned. Children are not reliable witnesses to administrative timing. Nia reached into her coat and took out her old phone, but she did not play the recording again. Instead, she opened a photo. It was blurry, taken by accident or by fear, angled from low near a plastic laundry basket. It showed the depot hallway, the time clock, the training poster, and above it, a small security camera with its green light on. At the edge of the photo, half cut off, was Paul Renner's dark suit sleeve. The same midnight fabric he was wearing now. Elliot's face did not change, but the room seemed to pull away from him. You were at the depot, Claire said. Paul's eyes moved to the phone. That proves nothing. No, Nia said softly. But the camera does. No one answered. The file Claire requested from building security arrived 12 seconds later. 12 seconds was long enough for Rain to tap the glass 13 times. Long enough for Vivian to stop smiling. Long enough for Paul's phone to vibrate in his pocket and for him not to dare touch it. The footage had no sound, only the cold blue silence of a hallway camera. It showed Marlene Voss standing beneath the poster at 3:38 p.m., holding a clipboard. At 3:40, Paul entered the frame. At 3:41, Marlene sat at the terminal. Paul leaned over her shoulder. His hand pointed to a column on the screen. A list of Youth Pass accounts scrolled by. Then Paul took the keyboard himself. The audit log beside the video matched each keystroke by time, device, and account. 47 holds. 3 shelter routes. 11 library renewals. Each one later marked served for reimbursement. Claire opened the last document. It was an internal note attached to Paul's approval batch. 6 words buried under corporate language, but clear enough to cut through all of it. Low-income riders unlikely to dispute. Elliot read it. Then he read it again. His skin went pale so slowly it seemed the light had been drained from him. On the muted television behind Paul, old gala footage played Elliot's younger face beneath a banner for Grace Mercer Access Fund. No child should have to prove they belong, the caption read. Elliot looked from the screen to Nia, to her wet sneakers, to the blue pass she had protected like it was her name. For a moment he could not speak. Paul finally said, very quietly, Elliot, think about Grace's legacy. Elliot placed Nia's paid pass flat on the table between them and said, calmly, that is exactly what I'm doing. Elliot's words did not echo. They landed flat and final, the way a lock sounds when it turns. Paul Renner stared at the blue paid pass on the table, then at the silent screen where his own hand still hovered over the depot keyboard in frozen security footage. He opened his mouth, but Claire was already saving copies to 3 separate drives, her face pale with the kind of anger that knew how to file paperwork. Elliot did not look at Paul again. Remove his system access, he said. Now. Vivian took 1 step backward, as if distance could make her less visible. Roy Harlan lowered his eyes. Within the hour, the gala was cancelled, not postponed, cancelled. The donors in black dresses and polished shoes were told there would be no champagne toast for Grace Mercer's name, while children were being erased from the buses built to carry them. By morning, Paul Renner had been terminated for cause, Marlene Voss placed under investigation, and Roy removed from service pending a city review. The board tried to keep the language soft. Elliot would not allow it. In the conference room overlooking the river, with rain still streaking the glass, he played the footage himself. Not the edited charity reel. Not the speeches. The hallway video. The scanner logs. The note that said low-income riders unlikely to dispute. When one board member murmured that public disclosure could damage the foundation, Elliot looked at the empty chair beside him where Nia had been offered a seat and said, "It was damaged when we needed a 9-year-old to audit our conscience." Denise Carter arrived later that afternoon in her gray cleaning uniform, still smelling faintly of lemon disinfectant and bus depot dust. She came prepared to apologize, because life had taught her that poor mothers were often expected to apologize for being wronged. But Elliot stood before she could speak. He told her her job was protected. Her back pay for unpaid overtime was being processed by an outside labor attorney, and she would report no longer to depot management but to an independent safety office with whistleblower protection. Denise listened with one hand on Nia's shoulder, not smiling yet, because trust does not return just because powerful people lower their voices. The next week, every child whose pass had been flagged received restored access, written apologies, and reimbursement where families had paid twice or missed work. The Grace Mercer Access Fund lost Paul's control permanently and was placed under independent oversight, with a rule printed in plain language at every depot and on every bus. A child may not be removed alone for a payment review. Nia's blue pass was not thrown away. Elliot asked permission before keeping a copy of it for the driver training room. The real one stayed with Nia, tucked safely into a new clear sleeve, beside the receipt she still refused to lose. Months later, on a quiet evening in the Carters' brighter apartment above a small bakery instead of behind the laundromat, Elliot sat at their kitchen table while rain softened the window. Denise set down bowls of soup. Nia's old cracked phone lay beside her homework, still saved, still charged, no longer the only thing protecting her. Elliot looked at it, then at the child who had raised a pass when no one wanted to see it. Nia spooned soup carefully, then said, "You stopped the bus, Mr. Mercer, but you listened after." Elliot could not answer for a moment. Outside, the city kept moving, but this time the truth had moved first, and the smallest voice in the room had finally been heard.